I realize that the ancestor trying to grab everybody, you grab everybody in the collective to find ourselves, why we have care and college life and everything, and use the opportunities to transform, change the activity, start with the rifle, burn with the rasta, start follow the inner self and start develop a new revolution, for an evolution for a long time, you know. Could
Absolutely.
have took your parents, say, yo, you know what, you don't touch up a bit, we top of college, all my friends touch up a bit, and you sure you can make money? Ah, we do it, and you took our parents, how we now get no degree, we work with them to business and make money, and then now we're about money, because that's all them thing in their generation, but our spirit is up. So when we win, they can uplift their spirit and focus spirituality and take a bit material, you know? So that they can dematerial themselves and understand more themselves because they overstand the material outside the world is.
So,
Or we upgrade them, but chaos came, you know.
well, if it is to be understood, chaos comes out of all of the experiences of forced order, and order is before chaos. But however, the kind of order before chaos, people are thinking that that order before chaos don't exist because they see chaos as first. But if we clearly understand the organization of the sequential order of things, chaos is a misunderstanding of the quietness of that first. And when the effect of the first becomes manifest as chaos, which is disorder, which is not disorder, it's just quiet, inactive organization. And so this quiet, inactive organization becomes this template for how we become the kind of people we become. And so as a matter of fact, indigenous people came out of that order, that it wasn't something they developed like it's an intellectual development or an intellectual discernment, but it's something that, just like knowing that they're before this chaotic theorem of trying to bring order to a disordered space and state of being, man was in a harmonious state of being, not overcome by the dichotomy developed to create beings and such. Like, thinking about origins, we were talking before earlier, right? When I was younger, my uncle called me Mr. Chinaman, and I would say that don't make no sense. I would say I was a black man, and say no, you're a Chinaman. And for several times I didn't understand the genetic heritage of my ancestors, right? Until I did my genetic and blood work and understood that my genetics is mixed with Mongolian, with the native Tainos, but also with Ethiopic mixtures as well too, with the Harappans, right? To the Sadhus, right? And maybe even a little bit of the Dravidians there. And so as we were examining that cultural dynamic of the way in which each of us in this part of the West, the Amur Indians here, right, mixing with the early Ethiopians through the empires of Moro and the Moorish empires that dominated Europe for hundreds of years and thousands of years, when Europe were vassal states of Mosul empires in Mauritania, in Morocco, and the mixture of the Amazigh, the Berber people, into the Moorish armies that came to Europe, and basically for hundreds of years had an empire that spread all the way to Asia and thousands of years into the Americas. And so the Toltecs, the Olmecs, the Mexica, even the Mayans, right? It's a set of people, Brother Bob, that many times is not talked about in this part of the reality, in the sense that we are told about dreadlocks hairstyles, right? And when we are told about dreadlock hairstyles, they usually are telling us some Ethiopic and maybe Egyptian influences at times, not realizing that it was already indigenous in the Americas, right? And the Mongols that came here through the Khans, right? Through Attila and Genghis Khan's conquest. These hunter-gatherers kind of refashioned the Americas, and the gardener-minded agrarian that became the agriculturalist mind of the Aboriginals of the Americas, right? Lost their culture. It was expropriated. So now you have not just the $5 Aboriginals, the $5
native till indigo, right? Not the $5 Indians only, but you have many people that have expropriated our culture into even European moniker. And so now there's a warfare coming on between Canaanites, pre-Canaanites and post-Canaanites, Aboriginal empires. When Aboriginal, the Negroid, as it's referred to in anthropology, there are 4 main branches, right? There's a Negroid branch that is within the Congo, right? There's a Negroid branch that is up in the Sahara, right? So you have the Neolithic people, right, as one of those groups. And there are 2 clear groups there, right? They are the Andaman Islanders that have a clear genetic difference, right, as Aboriginals, right? And we also have the Aboriginals of Australia coupled with the people of the Americas, the Copper Amerindian people of the Americas. And so we talk about Indus Kush, we talk about Harappan civilization, we talk about that broad spread of culture, historical heritage. Like even in the Americas, the heritage of pyramids not just stretch all the way to the Americas. Because I dated this Mayan, right? And she would say I'm a Chinese, say a Chinese race, right? Chinese race. And when I did the blood work and I found out that the Mongolians had such a strong bearing upon my genealogy, I couldn't, disagree with it, because what was being said when I was a child, my spirit would say to me, because you always talk about your inner spirit. My inner spirit told me hammocks, bow and arrows, learn Chinese, eat with chopsticks. That's what it told me, Yeshua, right? In all of that, that's what my ancestors told me. So I come to learn about the longhouse and about the culture of the peacock, the buffalo. I come to learn about maize, canoes. I come to learn about river fish. I come to learn about my Moorish ancestors through Nani of the Maroon. I came to learn about those other parts of the reality Bob. So I get to realize that history is what sets a man's mind free when he has knowledge of the divergence of his genetic origin, evolution. The Denisovans and the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon mixing in Europe, creating the postmodern version of the European, or the Caucasus.
One thing came from a top country. We are the Indian Jones,
Yes.
Last week was a start. I don't know, movie that Netflix. I'm start from old movies. The old movie is more important. The first movie more for the Indian Jones, the Ark of the Covenant. You start laughing, love, because every secret message in the movie, what? That Indian Jones, the Ark of the Covenant, the missing Ark of the Covenant. That's what the message what they talk. The message there, them people are normal,
Because teaching the history of the earth, to be honest, Bob, you kind of have to do it even if you are the power broker of the times in a certain way. So I said the Denisovans and the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnon mixing in Europe, which is a bit of the Indus-European, Indus-Aryan, and creating this modern kind of a Kali-based dance destruction, and this kind of a new philosophy that separates us. But the ancient cultures never had any such separation. We had that order before chaos, and before chaos theorem could come and say it is now the operation of cultural, political, social and human evolution. Before that ideation, the natural order that run things. I was running things pretty well. People knew that nature had the encoding of being, the supporter, the supplier, the very nurturer of your being. And so everything honored the seasons, right? Getting your bow and arrow, getting a little net. If you go fish your jangles out of the river, you look a river fish, dig out your canoe. If you go around the coastline, in between the little atolls. Here in Taino, Locono Empire in Jamaica, we develop a highly cultural experience that by the time the evolution of time and the Cracker and Rodinia became the Americas and Africa, and then Mansa Musa and great empires came around here trading from the 1100s, right? We got ancestors coming through the African into the Americas, some 1200s into 1300s, bringing with them a mixture of what they now call Jewish culture. Before the advent of this postmodernist Jewish culture, and The Tainos, we took them into our culture, and so it's so interesting the mixes of the Americas over the last, not just 500 years, but the last 3,000 years. The trade in cotton, you know, to prove the connections between the African mainland, Ethiopia, and all the kingdoms of Meroe and the Moorish Empire and the Americas, you know, from cocaine in King Tut's stomach to show the indigenous things of the Americas ending up in the intestines, life and culture of people in continental Africa. You know, the Negroid gene in anthropology, in manifestation, the oldest beings found in the Americas. So even though the oldest being on the planets have been so far told to us to have been found in Ethiopia, we have to question some of those narratives, because we realize who's been selling us those narratives, because they have been ancient stories of this piece of land being inhabited for over 2 million years with, and I'm talking the Americas, with civilization that the earth has never yet seen. Our pyramids are the archetype by which the African pyramids were made from. So when I talk about the old world and the new world, a new world order is starting in Europe, mixing northeastern Africa into a philosophy of anciency that it does not have. Not that way, because this part of the earth, when it was in Rodinia, to this day and age, this part of the heritage is buried. The pyramids found in the America are so old, brother. They are beneath the ocean, Zari. That means that they were built in a period of time when the central pole on the planet was different. The North Pole was different. Polar shift accounts for the different epochs and eons, the 5 cultures spoken about in ancient texts. I understand that they're not going to just talk about the full history and heritage of the entire earth, but the African heritage, when it happened, a lot of this was one landmass. It wasn't Africa isolated. So why am I saying that? Because there's a kind of a grouping of people developing who are aboriginals here, who are going anti-Africans and saying we're not them and we're not them. And I make it very clear when I produce and present my information. I never try to present any such, you know, anger, separation. I make it very clear. When those pyramids were being made, when they were made, and when the greatest civilization started, Africa and America was one landmass. It was Rodinia, before the crack of the continental shift and before the great deluge. So the antediluvian world, if you want me to say, or the pre-diluvian world, if you want me to say, exists right here in the America, right? And Africa as one. So when Atlantis was one on a landmass that had Atlantis and Africa and America as one landmass. You understand saying?
And the Antarctica in the middle.
Yeah, Antarctica, Siberia. Yeah, the land bridge was still. Yeah, the land bridge was still there during the Harappan civilization. Connection between India, Sri Lanka. Yeah. Listen, brother.
And it's unified. It's different. Unified. Everything it come together.
Yes,
before
one.
it start crack and
separate
and think, and more, the water level.
So as we look at our heritage through our genetic blood codes, quotients and blood heritage, you can search it through the records, because even though people say the records are Europeans, but the Europeans are preserving the records. So you search onto the ancient bloodlines through the European file and record system, and then from there you take it to your ancestors. Be blessed if you're like Brother Bob and myself, who were able to first develop the connection to our ancestors, and then from then on, when I got instruction, I went to study it in the academic records, and then I could find my genetic markers, like I found and know of the historic blood work and heritage and evidence of early peoples of the indigenous world. So I know that lots of people claim that they are indigenous, and in order to be indigenous, you have to have a particular bloodline. And this particular blood has to be the rarest blood on earth. It just so happens that my mother possesses this rarest blood that even the European genes Sartare comes from. Even the European genes come from within my mother's blood work. I am the universal blood donor because of my mother, right? So when we talk about indigenous, some people say they're indigenous, but they're not indigenous. We can trace where your bloodline diverged from the original genes, right? And these things are genetic research which you can go, well, I'm not telling everybody they can go and do that, but you know, if you are in these areas, many people are studying it and do not even know what it means because the wool is over their eye to not realize that the Aboriginals are a specific bloodline of people, right? And the only people who will have similar platelets and such like yourself are other Aboriginals, right? You cannot be measured by cultural grouping. So this is far beyond cultural grouping because the Aboriginals of the earth are scattered to the four corners of the earth like the word says. You understand me? But you're reading it just like Christianity and people telling you, oh, we're native, like it has nothing to do with ancient civilization that you're learning about as Jewish and whatever Phoenicians, right, and Canaanite civilizations. You need to understand that they are also connected to us, and geographically a lot of them happened in places that you thought that did not happen in. So if you're not realizing that the ancient civilization happened on one landmass, from the Arappans right down here, I mean India, all the way to the Moorish empires, all the way here in the Americas, with the Aboriginals mixed in through the early vassal states before this new world order with European vassal states as the head. All of the European vassal states are under the seal and the symbols of the ancient empires because that's how true powers have come down. So we didn't just hand them over a mystic bow and arrow. Go and study law and see that in all the nations, from the Blackfoot nations into the Americas, right? I'm from the Lenape Blackfoot nations. New York was my place from my entire lifetime there in the American Arizona, right? The Choctaw and the Navajo Indians, right? We had to sign documents to expropriate our land and property. Same with us, the Tainos here in Jamaica, Jamaica. That means that Maraca and Hamaka signed treaties with these Europeans, right? And though the Shriners maintain a lot of this knowledge, the fact is it is the law. And so I squarely speak out for the fact that the Aboriginals should have our heritage, have the right of our heritage, not be taught this postmodernist European version of this kind of African culture in the postmodern. All of that culture came from one time and one space. That is why all the language and linguistics are speaking the same. Learn the truth about the planet, the plane. The American civilization go a whole lot longer. Just like how 300,000, 400,000 into millions of years into Africa. Millions of years here in the Americas as well too. Millions of years. Our pyramids are older, the schematics are older in the ancient polar shifts. So these were the first world, second world and the third world Nabi usually tell us about, right? The 5 cultures, right? The different epochs in time that goes through from Genesis to Revelation. Is that Nabi taught us? Yeah? From destruction unto rebirth, unto destruction unto rebirth. Cycles within cycles within cycles. Know thyself, my people. Know yourself. Know your heritage, which is the heritage of the hominids, the heritage of the divine beings, whether through relation to inner earth Agartha, Shambhala, or to all the astral planes, right? And to the Atlantean plane, into all of the planes, into all of the dimensions, into the new plane raptured into the 5th dimension, coming in unto us now, of which the Bible speaks of, the paradise. Behold, I see coming from the heaven a new heaven and a new earth. Behold, the new Jerusalem is upon us. While this plane of its negativity and density will shift back into retrograde density in the ionosphere and the age of bronze, going back into retrograde thinking, carnality, warfare, war over water, and the mineral resources of the planet. As the scarcity, the solar flares, and the disasters, the plagues, and the pestilence will approach the fallen who have departed from the genetic heritage of the carbonite, melanocyte, evolve, my people, grow into the raptured space of the new Jerusalem. Heaven is awaiting our ascendance. Blessings until next time. Keep
focusing on the internal, all of the star seeds have grown and all the chakrams align. And we're not slipping off the realms into oblivion or the blue screen of death. We are going forward into the active, multi-dimensional, multi-plane existence. Glory unto Yahuwah, Yeshua, the great spirits. This has been the great owl and the mystic Bob, yeah? On the road, just reasoning, keeping it real. Love and blessing.